In our last topic, we saw that in order to help our physical and spiritual children learn to explain why God showed great mercy to the descendants of Canaan, even though they became very evil and offered many of their children as human sacrifices to their false god. In this topic, we will learn about the development of the nations through the three sons of Noah and learn key lessons about some of them. In Genesis 10, verses 1 through 5, we read, "Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, each according to his language, according to their families, into their nations." In these verses, we will have the descendants of Japheth. Following the changing languages at the Tower of Babel, which will be described in the next chapter, we see that the descendants of Japheth gradually moved and settled into the continent of Europe and the northwest part of Asia. The word translated coastlands means region, coast, or island. These verses show that the people divided into various regions based on their languages, families, and nations that God had given to them. We go on to read about the descendants of Ham. We are given more detail about two sons of Ham. Genesis 10, verse 6 to 14 says, "The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka. And the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Resen, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the principal city. Mizraim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrasim, and Casluhim, from whom came the Philistines and Caphtorhim." The descendants of Ham gradually settled into the Middle East and on the continent of Africa. One of the sons of Ham was Nimrod. We read that he became a mighty one on the earth. The word translated mighty one is used 158 times in the Old Testament and is used to speak of a man known for his power as a warrior. In 1 Samuel 16, verse 18, this word is used to describe David. Saul was looking for a man who could play the harp well, and was told in that verse, "Look, I have seen a man, a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him." Then in 1 Samuel 17, verse 51, we read, "Therefore David ran instead over the Philistine, took his sword, and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled." These uses show that the word is used about a mighty man who is either good or evil. In this verse, the word was used to speak of Goliath the Philistine. These and other men about whom this word is used were often mighty warriors. We see this word was used 3 times about Nimrod. Twice we see that Nimrod is called a mighty hunter before the Lord. The word translated before appears as either before or several words like face and similar words. It is used twice in Genesis 4, verse 5 through 6, where it talks about the countenance or face of Cain being fallen. Genesis 4, verse 5 through 6 says, "But he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen?'" Here we see that it talks about a very angry face. In many other places, it talks about either the face of a person, the face of the earth, or the face of God. We see the face can describe joy, anger, or even rebellion. Here, we see that the face of Nimrod probably showed his rebellion against God. Several of these cities established by Nimrod were very evil, as these verses indicate that he was probably the leader in the decision to build the Tower of Babel. He was also involved in the beginning of Babylon and Nineveh during his lifetime. Each of these places showed great rebellion against God and Israel, as Nineveh later destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel and Babylon later destroyed Judah. We see the Philistines were descendants of Nimrod, and they fought against Israel many times. We also have more details about Canaan and his descendants. He was another son of Ham. We have already seen that Canaan was cursed in the previous chapter when Ham showed disrespect to Noah, which may mean that Canaan was with Ham. Genesis 10 verse 15 through 20 says, Canaan begot Sidon, the firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Afterward, the families of the Canaanites were dispersed, and the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as you go toward Gerar, as far as Gaza. Then, as you go towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These were the sons of Ham, according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands, and in their nations. We see that the families of the Canaanites were dispersed in verse 18. The word translated were dispersed is used 3 more times in Genesis 11. First, the people used the word to show their rebellion against the commandment of God to multiply and fill the earth. Genesis 11 verse 4 says, And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Here we see that the people chose to rebel against God, so they would not be scattered. Then, Genesis 11 verse 8 through 9 says, So the Lord scattered them abroad the earth, all over the face of the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore, its name is called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad the face of the earth. In these verses, we see that the Lord scattered the people by confusing the language. When the families of Canaan left the area of the Tower of Babel, we see that they moved to the area which became known as the land of Canaan. And the land of Canaan, where the descendants of Canaan settled, stretched from Sidon as far north as Gaza, along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and as far south as the south end of the west side of the Dead Sea. We also see that the descendants of Ham were scattered according to the language in the lands of their nations. When God confused the language, we see that the descendants of the sons of Noah were scattered to the lands and formed the nations that God had planned for them. We go on to read about the descendants of Shem. Genesis 10 verse 21 through 32 says, And children were born also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. The sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hol, Gether, and Mash. Arphaxad begot Salah, and Salah begot Eber. To Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg. For in his day the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan begot Almadad, Sheleph, Hazamarveth, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jabab. All these were the sons of Joktan, and their dwelling place from Mesha, as you go towards Sephar, the mountains of the east. These were the sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their languages in their lands, according to their nations. These were the families of the sons of Noah, according to their generations, in their nations, and from these the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. We see that the descendants of Shem were spread eastward across Asia, including the islands and Australia. They also spread across what is now called the Bering Straits to the Americas. Noah gave a blessing to Shem and then to Japheth when he pronounced judgment on the descendants of Canaan. Genesis 9 verse 26 through 27 says, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." The descendants of Shem far outnumber the descendants of Ham. In addition, the descendants of Japheth outnumber the descendants of Ham, although by a much smaller number. We see that it was during the days of Peleg that the people of the world were divided. God chose to make it very clear that the entire world is populated by the descendants of the three sons of Noah. They also experienced the changing of the language at the same time. This section about Shem ends the same as the sections about the descendants of Japheth and Ham. We see that the descendants of Shem also spread according to their families, according to their language, in their lands, and in their nations. Then we are given a summary of the entire family of Noah. The word translated generations means to bring forth and is another word for their descendants in most cases. However, it is used in Genesis 2 verse 4 to speak of the act of God in creation. That verse says, "This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." In this verse, the word is translated history. Most uses are like Genesis 5 verse 1, where we read, "This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in likeness of God." In this verse, we see that the word is translated genealogy. One of the questions many people have is, where did we come from? The world tries to deny the creation by God. We want to help our physical and spiritual children learn to explain what the Bible teaches us so we can help others to understand that we came from Adam through Noah, through one of his three sons. May the Lord richly bless you as you help your children learn to understand and explain these things.